U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to delay major tariff hikes on trading partners has offered temporary relief, but could extend global trade instability, the UN warned today. The U.S. had set a deadline of July 9th for its controversial Liberation Day tariffs. However, President Trump announced a 3-week extension, pushing the decision to August 1st. This gives countries additional time to negotiate agreements and avoid steep levies on exports to the U.S. Pamela Coke-Hamilton, director of the UN-backed International Trade Center, expressed concern that the delay would only prolong uncertainty, which could hurt long-term investments and business deals. She stressed that businesses need predictability to make informed decisions. The UN also highlighted that the U.S. isn't alone in imposing new trade barriers, with over 150 trade restrictions introduced globally this year. While developing countries face the brunt of this uncertainty, Coke-Hamilton suggested that nations could find new growth opportunities by focusing on regional trade, processing goods domestically, and supporting small businesses. She also pointed to China's recent tariff offer of tariff-free access for African nations as a potential game changer. As the global trade landscape remains volatile, experts stress the need for stability to mitigate economic risks. Let's listen in to Pamela Coke-Hamilton what she had to say.
And while the reciprocal tariffs will no longer go into effect tomorrow, as originally announced, but be extended for another few weeks until 1st of August, this move actually extends the period of uncertainty, undermining long-term investment and business contracts and creating further uncertainty and instability. Economic uncertainty has real-world consequences, as we all know, on countries and on sectors. Adding to the uncertainty created by the tariffs and related trade measures, we're simultaneously seeing deep cuts in development aid, creating a dual shock for developing countries in the world of trade and aid. G7 countries, which together account for around 3/4 of all official development assistance, are set to slash their aid spending by 28% next year compared to 2024 levels. This would be the biggest cut in aid since the G7 was established 50 years ago. And this is from Oxfam. In short, in today's context, a perfect storm is brewing. Just as trade becomes more unpredictable, external support through aid is also shrinking.
Now we go to this discussion with our guest, Jayjit Bhattacharya. He's an economist and finance expert. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How does ongoing uncertainty from trade barriers affect developing countries differently compared to developed countries or economies? Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So how does ongoing uncertainty from trade barriers affect developing countries differently compared to developed economies, according to you?
If you look at the new round of tariffs which has been put, and you look at the names of countries over there, it includes countries like Myanmar, Laos, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and so on, which were really tethering and has a huge number of poor people. And there was a large workforce which dependent on exports to US. Now with these trade tariffs coming in, it really impacts almost the backbone of these countries, because a large number of workers will get displaced. And therefore the multiplier effect, the secondary and tertiary effects of these workers not being able to buy things will have a significant impact on their economies. But if you look at the more developed economies, let's say Europe for that matter, or Western Europe to be more precise, they have the ability to diversify. They themselves have a large market, and therefore the impact that will have on the developed Western economies is significantly different from the impact and the nature of impact that will happen on the less developed economies, because of the impact that these jobs or job losses that will have on those respective economies. And therefore, the developing economies or the less developed economies will bear a significantly more brunt of the vacillations on the tariffs that the U.S. president is putting in.
And now, what role can regional trade agreements and domestic processing play in helping countries navigate these current global trade disruptions, according to you?
Well, the domestic consumption may not necessarily help smaller countries like, Myanmar, Laos, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Cambodia, and so on, because their domestic market is very small. And therefore, it is necessary that they start integrating. And when they start integrating economically, that's where the regional trade agreements start playing a more important role, because each of these entities start getting a market access, which is critical for them. So, I mean, let's say Myanmar is good in fisheries, and that's what Cambodia needs, and Cambodia needs fishes, and the usual trade that happens. So Myanmar can then start exporting to Cambodia, which will then take care of the loss of market in US, and the other way around. Cambodia can start exporting, let's say, wood back to Myanmar, and so on and so forth. So new markets have to get created through regional trade agreements, and each of these economies do not really have a deep domestic market to be able to support the kind of growth that they need.
Thank you very much, Jaijit Bhattacharya, for joining us today and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our